News from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the Newstalk Radio Newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
Good day with your major newscast. I am Jessica Daw. First with the highlights. The National COVID Task Force has relaxed some measures for bar, restaurant, and churches to usher in the new year in the traditional way. House Speaker Manzoor Nadir says the opposition parliamentarians who removed the mace during Wednesday's debate on the Natural Resource Fund legislation will be punished. Opposition leader Joseph Harman stopped short of accusing the House Speaker Manzoor Nadir of lying when he claimed that the Parliament has two maces, the symbol of parliamentary authority. Finance Minister Dr. Ashni Singh says no minister can draw down any of the oil money without parliamentary approval. In the region, an alliance between the People's Party for Democracy and Development and the United Progressive Party of Barbados has been pronounced dead on arrival by two of the country's leading political pundits. And internationally, the head of the World Health Organization says he is optimistic that 2022 will see the coronavirus pandemic defeated, but only if countries work together. The details of these stories and more in just a moment.
Advertise with us on Newstalk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM for best coverage on programs on motivation, beauty and health, parenting and relationships, knowing your rights, and a variety of enlightening content, and get value for your money. Call our helpful staff today on 223-1056 or 223-1041 today.
Now for the news in detail. The National COVID Task Force, NCTF, says that churches are allowed to hold services until 12:45 a.m. on the morning of January 1st only. Restaurants and bars are also allowed to open their businesses until that time. The NCTF says the national curfew has been adjusted and begins from 12:45 on the morning of January 1st to 4 a.m. January 1st only. The statement by the NCTF says all other measures governing religious activities under the measure apply. The task force says it will take serious action against unauthorized events on unregulated bars and street parties during the Old Year, New Year period. NCTF says conditional approvals may be given for specific activities on request. The COVID Task Force is urging the public to demonstrate responsible behavior during this pandemic holiday season. House Speaker Manzoor Nadir says the opposition parliamentarians who removed the mace during Wednesday's debate on the Natural Resource Fund legislation will be punished. The mace was removed as Finance Minister Dr. Ashni Singh was debating the Natural Resource Fund bill despite loud chanting and whistleblowing by opposition parliamentarians.
And so we are witnessing now unprecedented vulgarity in the National Assembly of Guyana, consistent with the vulgarity of the Natural Resource Fund Act that the then APNU-AFC government
One second, Honorable Member. Hold 1 second.
The House Speaker told a news conference that those involved will be punished, but he did not say what sanctions will be imposed.
And in every parliament, an attack on the mace is an attack on the authority of parliament. And that attack on the mace cannot go unpunished. I could not find an easier word than punished.
Mr. Nadir declines to name the parliamentarian who spearheaded the removal of the mace, only saying that the video recordings show who participated in what he termed the terrorist behavior. House Speaker Manzoor Nadir's disclosure that Guyana's parliament has two maces, the symbol of parliamentary authority, is not going down well with opposition leader Joseph Harmon. Mr. Nadir made the disclosure in defending his view that the Natural Resource Fund legislation was properly passed because the mace was in place and most of the government parliamentarians were in their seats when the vote was called Wednesday night.
Since my ascension, we looked at many possible occurrences, and one was to have another mace in the event the traditional mace could not be found to put in place whenever Parliament sits. We have another mace. The smaller mace that we used last evening is an exact replica of the mace that was presented to Guyana by the House of Commons when we became independent.
But Mr. Harmon stopped short of accusing the House Speaker of lying.
The Speaker's statement that Guyana has two maces is appalling and is simply untrue. The replica referred to by the Speaker is a miniature mace which was made for the hosting of Guyana's National Youth Parliament. And that mace holds no authority in the sitting of the National Assembly.
He also says that the parliamentary rules do not permit the use of a replica mace.
There is no rule that provides for the use of a replica mace in the National Assembly, as is being touted by the Speaker. The Speaker cannot simply pick up something and replace the official mace of the National Assembly when the rules clearly state that if the mace is not in the House, absolutely no business can be done. Again, there is no provision for the use of a replica or substitute mace.
Asked to respond to Mr. Harmon's statement, Mr. Nadir said the leader of the opposition is entitled to his opinion. Minister of Governance and Parliamentary Affairs, Gilty Shearer, says opposition leader Joseph Harmon has a very slim chance of successfully challenging the legality of the Natural Resource Fund legislation. Mr. Harmon has suggested that he may go to court to challenge the legality of the Natural Resource Fund law because the mace, the symbol of parliamentary authority, was not in the National Assembly. But Mr. Shearer says such a case may be thrown out.
It would be highly unlikely, and I'm not a lawyer, for the court to get involved in ruling on something like this when the court has already, on a number of issues that were related to Parliament, said no, this is a matter that Parliament has to handle.
Mr. Shearer, however, says that Mr. Harmon can rather bring his own bill or amendments.
Does he have any recourse in Parliament itself? No, he has none. There is no other recourse except he can bring his own bill. If he wants to bring a bill that he feels can do better than what this is, he has a right as a member of Parliament. You can bring a private member's bill. If he thinks there are deficiencies in this bill, he can also, as a member of Parliament, wait a while and come back and propose some amendments to the Act now. It would be an Act then. He has a right to do that.
The opposition says that the new law puts control of the fund in a board that will be handpicked by the president. On top of that, the opposition says that a 22-member parliamentary oversight committee has been reduced to 9 persons. APNU plus AFC, as well as 5 civil society organizations, say that the formula for withdrawing monies gives the government too much power to abuse and squander Guyana's oil wealth. Finance Minister Dr. Ashni Singh says no minister can draw down any of the oil money without parliamentary approval. Government has a simple majority to pass any law, motion, or allocation of funds. He says the Natural Resource Fund Act states that whether for regular or emergency financing, the Parliament must give approval.
This minister and any other minister who will come after this minister operating under this act cannot go into the fund and draw down a single dollar for purposes of emergency financing or indeed for any other purposes unless they go to Parliament first, submit a request to the Parliament, and secure approval from the Parliament. So I want to make that crystal clear. There's no arbitrary drawdown for any purpose, emergency or otherwise. There has to be prior parliamentary scrutiny and approval.
Dr. Singh says the monies will first have to be transferred from the Natural Resource Fund to the Consolidated Fund before they can be allocated and spent. He says if the monies are misused, the Finance Minister can be punished under the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act. The opposition People's National Congress Reform and a number of civil society organizations fear that amendments to the Natural Resource Fund will create a floodgate to the oil money being used as a slush fund under the guise of emergency funding. The passage of a local content bill now makes it law for foreign companies investing in Guyana's oil and gas sector to employ, hire, and use mainly Guyanese services. Minister of Natural Resources Vikram Bharat says Guyanese are now assured of directly benefiting from downstream of the oil sector under 40 initial areas. The bill provides for Guyanese to register their local businesses with the Local Content Secretariat.
Will require every single Guyanese business to be registered with the Local Content Secretariat at the Ministry. So we will start maybe as soon as next week with the President's ascension to the bill. We will start creating those registers as early as next week. 1, to deal with employment, and 2, to deal with goods and services. So we'll have 2 registers, 1 with names and the background of people who want to work in the oil and gas sector, and 2 with the local businesses, the companies that would like to do business with the oil and gas companies.
The law also requires foreign companies to submit a 5-year and annual plan for review by the Secretariat. The Natural Resource Minister says through the law, they are required to do business with Guyanese-owned and registered companies.
Every single business and every single Guyanese would like to have 100% here. And I would want to see that too, because from us on the government side, the reason why we presented this bill and we had it passed in the National Assembly is because we want Guyanese to benefit from the oil and gas sector. We didn't leave it at a policy level and the goodwill of companies. We have an act now compelling oil companies to do business with Guyanese company. So that is a guarantee from the government that we want Guyanese to benefit. We want Guyanese to benefit. And we want this to be 100% right through. And we want to add 40 more services to it. But then we must have the capacity to do it.
The law provides for a certain percentage of Guyanese involvement in oil companies, including equal pay for local and expatriate.
90% of the office space rented by oil companies, be it ExxonMobil, CNOOC, Hess, or whatever the case is, it must be owned by Guyanese, or Guyanese must have at least 50% of the share. Accommodation, apartments, example, 90%. Waste management, 75%. Warehousing, 60%. Janitorial supply services, 90%. Food supply, 75%. Lay-down yard facility, 90%. The local insurance, as I mentioned, 100%. Local legal services, 90%. Security services, 95%. Trucking services, 100% Guyanese. And these are just a few.
The Minister of Natural Resources says the law is subject to review as Guyana increases capacity, which provides for the minister to issue an order for the change and/or inclusion. The joint services to closely monitor Old Year's night events to avoid large gatherings and the spread of COVID-19. Minister of Health Dr. Frank Anthony says the government is strict on ensuring that all businesses and entertainment spots abide by COVID-19 measures governing those businesses. The Health Minister says there will be increased joint services patrols to ensure compliance with the measures. The Health Minister urges the public to also obey the protocols, failure to which may result in increased COVID cases. Dr. Anthony says an increased number of cases after the holidays can quickly overwhelm the health system. Dr. Frank Anthony advised against using cloth masks, which are less effective, and for the public to make the N95 mask their choice of mask to wear. The Health Ministry's official COVID data shows a significant increase in positive COVID cases following the Christmas weekend. The data shows 157 new COVID infections recorded in the last 24 hours. However, there was only one death of an unvaccinated male, which takes the toll to 1,052. The number of persons in the COVID intensive care unit remains low at 7 persons. The number of persons hospitalized saw a marginal increase, which now stands at 35 persons. The ministry says 711 persons are now home isolating, which also increased after the Christmas weekend. The health minister is warning that should persons not follow measures, the number of positive cases is likely to increase after the end of year activities. A 57-year-old man of Walton Hall, Essequibo Coast, was Thursday afternoon burnt to death in his house. He has been identified as Ramdas Samdas. The Guyana Fire Service says it is currently investigating the cause of the blaze at 91 Walton Hall. Samdas lived in the one-flat wooden building with his partner, Sarojini Prasad. The house and its contents were also destroyed by the blaze. The Guyana Fire Service, meanwhile, appealed to Guyanese to equip their homes with smoke detectors and fire extinguishers and to be careful when cooking or using electrical appliances. The fire service is also advising persons to unplug electrical appliances after use and do not leave them plugged in for a prolonged period. Also, they're being asked not to overload power strips or electrical circuits and ensure stoves are turned off properly when cooking and ensure matches or cigarettes are put out completely when smoking. Suriname's police have handed over a Guyanese man who was wanted for murder to Guyanese police. Crime Chief Wendell Blanham says that 19-year-old Ezekiel Hawker, called Alpha, was arrested on Wednesday and promptly handed over to Guyanese police. Mr. Blanham says that Mr. Hawker has since confessed to the shooting death of Dion Charles on Christmas Eve night in Albois Town. Mr. Hawker reportedly told police that he shot Charles in retaliation for shooting at him twice before. Investigators have also arrested the driver of a vehicle who allegedly transported the murderer from the scene. The murder accused, from the scene. Police say he is cooperating. Mr. Hawker, who is a shopkeeper on Forshaw Street, Queenstown, Georgetown, remains in custody as police prepare to seek legal advice. In the region, an alliance between the People's Party for Democracy and Development, PDP, and the United Progressive Party, UPP, has been pronounced dead on arrival by two of the country's leading political pundits. According to Barbados Today News, University of the West Indies UWI lecturer Dr. Christina Hines declared that although stronger together, the marriage of the convenience would falter over its failure to attract mass-based support. Meanwhile, pollster Peter Wickham believes the merger may be taking much-needed support from the Democratic Labour Party, DLP, which is considered government's strongest opponents. On Thursday, opposition leader Bishop Joseph Artley added to a week of political surprises with one of his own, announcing that the two parties would unite under the name Alliance Party for Progress. Along with UPP founder Lynette Eastman, the organizations have vowed to preserve Barbadian democracy. Dr. Hines warned that they will have a lot of work to do to convince the electorate to vote for their candidates, many of whom are believed to be new to public life. The UWI lecturer noted that Artley's overall experience and ability to win a seat in the last election would be a useful asset. However, Wickham was adamant that Artley, who crossed the floor weeks after the May 2018 polls, secured his seat on the coattails of Mayor Muttley. He then dismissed the UPP as irrelevant over their failure to amass more than 3% of the popular vote during the 2018 poll. Year-end celebrations and election campaigning are permitted with strict protocols and limitations despite the week-long upsurge in COVID-19 cases and the confirmation of the Omicron variant in Barbados. Head of the COVID-19 monitoring unit, Ronald Chapman, said Thursday that applications for 6 events on Friday night have been approved, 5 for Saturday and 1 for January 2nd, all outdoor events. He told a news conference at Ilaro Court that more applications are anticipated but served to notice that all protocols must be followed. The Barbados Today News says regarding campaigning in the coming days ahead of the January 19, 2022 general elections, Chapman says protocols used in the St. George South by-election would be tweaked and enforced to ensure the voting process is safe for all Barbadians. According to Chapman, political parties have agreed to host 3 large events. He assured that the monitoring unit will be able to keep close watch of events, noting that it had previously engaged people from the 30 polling districts to assist with monitoring events. Chapman says the unit would also be reinforced by police. And lastly, in the region, Cuba will be giving booster shots to the entire population in January in an effort to keep the highly contagious Omicron variant of the coronavirus at bay. According to Star News, health authorities on the island, which relies heavily on tourism, last week reported a 35% week-on-week rise in coronavirus cases. Cuba recorded at least 44 cases of Omicron, although both infections and deaths from COVID-19 remain at 1% of their pandemic peak on August 22. Health Minister Jose Angel Portal Miranda says the Omicron threat had prompted Cuba to accelerate its booster campaign and that everyone eligible would receive a booster shot in January. Cuba has already administered nearly 1.5 million boosters in the capital, Havana, and to high-risk groups such as health workers. That campaign will now spread across the island in the coming weeks. The nation has vaccinated 92% of the population with at least one shot and 85% with a full course of its homegrown vaccines. That puts it second in the world, behind only the United Arab Emirates, among countries with at least 1 million inhabitants. Cuba is one step ahead of its neighbors in Latin America and other emerging economies by developing its own vaccines rather than competing with those of rich countries. Here now is your international news coming from the BBC.
BBC News with Sue Montgomery. The head of the World Health Organization says he's optimistic that 2022 will see the coronavirus pandemic defeated, but only if countries work together. In a New Year message, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said the world now had many more tools to prevent and treat COVID-19, which could signal its end, but only if countries work together.
We should dramatically increase access and lower mortality. But narrow nationalism and vaccine hoarding by some countries have undermined equity and created the ideal conditions for the emergence of the Omicron variant. And the longer inequity continues, the higher the risks of the virus evolving in ways we can't prevent or predict.
The WHO wants to get 70% of the global population vaccinated by the middle of 2022. France has become the latest country to confirm that the fast-spreading Omicron variant has become its main coronavirus strain. Public health officials said more than 60% of tests were consistent with Omicron. It's caused a huge surge in infections, with more than 200,000 cases recorded in 24 hours. Israel has started to administer fourth COVID vaccine shots to people with weakened immune systems. It's one of the first countries in the world to do so. Heart transplant patients were among the first to get the jab. Kenya's Education Minister, George Magoha, says all gay and lesbian students should be barred from attending boarding schools. The minister's comments have caused a furore. From Nairobi, Emmanuel Agunza.
It's not very clear why he made this comment, but he seems to think that there is a gay or lesbian culture within some boarding secondary schools, and that is why he wants all the students who are LGBTQ to be transferred from boarding schools and taken to day schools near their homes. It's caused quite a big uproar in the country that if his comments will then be translated into directives or policy, then it could target LGBT students who could be put in danger.
2 explosions have been reported outside the Cambodian embassy in Myanmar's biggest city, Yangon. No one is believed to have been injured in the blasts, which come just days before the Cambodian leader Hun Sen is set to visit the Burmese capital, Naypyidaw. He will be meeting Myanmar's military leaders who seized power in a coup almost a year ago. The military's opponents and international observers have denounced the Cambodian visit, arguing it gives legitimacy to Myanmar's junta. BBC News. The Ennahda opposition party in Tunisia says one of its leaders, Noureddin Bekhiri, has been detained by security forces. Mr. Bekhiri is the first senior official in the moderate Islamist Ennahda to be arrested since President Kais Saied took over the powers of government in July. French agriculture officials say the country has culled up to 650,000 chickens, ducks and other poultry this month in an effort to contain the latest outbreak of bird flu. Farmers are under an injunction to keep poultry indoors to avoid contact with diseased wild birds. A 3-year phasing out of ivory products in Hong Kong has culminated in a near-complete ban in the trade from today. Small queues of shoppers were seen waiting outside some shops selling ivory before the ban came into force. Future offenders face up to 10 years in prison or a maximum fine of $1.3 million. The Cafe Owners Association in Sri Lanka has decided to suspend selling milk tea after the cost of milk powder shot up owing to import restrictions. And Barasan Etarajan has more details.
The cafe owner said they were willing to provide tea if the customers insisted, but they should be prepared to pay more for the brew. Ceramic and plastic cups have been banned because of the pandemic, and shop owners have been using disposable cups. But the price of those cups has also doubled. The government has restricted the import of several items, including some essential food products, because of a severe foreign exchange reserve crisis.
Australia has welcomed the new year with its annual fireworks display above Sydney Harbour. Attendees were encouraged to be vaccinated. Earlier, New Zealand marked the start of 2022 with a light show in Auckland. Festivities around the globe are muted once again because of the pandemic. BBC News.
And that was your international news. Here now is a recap of the highlights. The National COVID Task Force has relaxed some measures for bar, restaurant and churches to usher in the new year in the traditional way. House Speaker Manzoor Nadir says the opposition parliamentarians who removed the mace during Wednesday's debate on the Natural Resource Fund legislation will be punished. Opposition leader Joseph Harman stopped short of accusing the House Speaker Manzoor Nadir of lying when he claimed that the Parliament has 2 maces, the symbol of parliamentary authority. Finance Minister Dr. Ashni Singh says no minister can draw down any of the oil money without parliamentary approval. In the region, an alliance between the People's Party for Democracy and Development and the United Progressive Party of Barbados has been pronounced dead on arrival by 2 of the country's leading political pundits. And internationally, the head of the World Health Organization says he is optimistic that 2022 will see the coronavirus pandemic defeated, but only if countries work together. And that was your major newscast. I am Jessica Daw.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves. If you miss No Big Thing, then is a big thing. So No Big Thing will be aired on January 1 at 9 hours and 18 hours and on January 2 at 14 hours on 103.1 FM News Talk Radio Guyana and streamed on bit.ly/newstalk1031. That's bit.ly/newstalk1031. No Big Thing on News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM. January 1 at 9 hours and 18 hours, and January 2 at 14 hours. Stretched Out Magazine, the annual satirical review for television, will be on radio on 103.1 FM for the first time. You heard right. The audio edition of Stretched Out Magazine will be on Newstalk Radio Guyana on January 1 and January 2 at 19 hours. Your relatives and friends can listen on bit.ly/Newstalk1031. And the television edition will be streamed on www.facebook.com/demwaves at 11 hours on January 1. That's www.facebook.com/demwaves. January 1 at 11 hours.